M mode has certainly lost much of its importance in modern echocardiography. Still, M mode does have its application in a routine exam. Let's take a look where we still need M mode and where its importance is. First of all, it's important to look at measurements of the aorta and the left atrium. It's also important to look at, or you can also look at the mitral valve with the help of M mode. And in particular, it's also good to measure the left ventricle. The size and the function can be assessed very nicely with M mode. This is an example of an M mode through the aorta, where we have the cut plane through the aortic root and the aortic valve and the left atrium. You can see the alignment of the M mode here. We have the M mode aligned in such a way that we are cutting right through portions of the right ventricle, the aorta, and the left atrium. This is the image you get. But now let's take a look at how we get these images. So this is how you would get the M mode for the measurements of the aorta and the left atrium. You can start out from a parasternal long axis view and perform the measurement, or you can also do it from a short axis view. I will show it to you from a short axis view. First of all, it's important to display the aortic valve in such a manner that you can see the leaflet or the cusps of the valve. And then you would put the M mode through the aorta in such a way that you can recognize the opening and closure of the valve. Okay? This is the aortic root. You have systole starting here. It's very easy to see, first of all, the ECG. Second of all, you have the opening motion of the right coronary cusp. This is the right coronary cusp when it's open. So this is systole. And then you have diastole, backwards motion of the aortic root, and a closed aortic valve. What you can see very often is you see little fibrillations of the cusps, which is normal. Sometimes they're more, sometimes they're less. So this is not a pathologic finding. When we do the measurement, we perform the measurement exactly at end diastole, so shortly before the aortic valve opens. So this would exactly be the best point to do the measurement. Let me just go into the correct program. So leading edge, front of the aortic root, front of the back wall of the aortic root. And then to measure the left atrium, you would check for the region of the left atrium where it is largest. This is systole here. And again, you would measure the left atrium here. And you would then get very similar measurements for the aorta and for the left atrium, in any case, normal measurements. So the advantage of M mode is the good time resolution, and therefore you can use it very nicely for measurements. Where do you measure the aorta? From the aortic root, the anterior portions to the posterior portions. Here, just shortly before the aortic valve opens, you see the box here, and shortly before the box opens. So with the QRS complex, basically. And the left atrium you measure where the left atrium is in its largest size, which is here at the time of the T wave, the time where the aortic valve is actually closed. Here you can see the normal values. The aorta should be approximately below 40, and the left atrium between 30 and 40 millimeters, but this varies with respect to the body surface area and also the gender. This is an example of an M mode now through the left ventricle. We have a cut plane which is now further towards the apex. We're transecting the right ventricle, the intraventricular septum, so the right ventricle, intraventricular septum, the left ventricle, this is this area here. Then we have the posterior wall, which is this, and the pericardium would be the region here. This is the M mode. You have, again, the right ventricular part of the right ventricle, the intraventricular septum, the left ventricle, and the posterolateral wall. Let's take a look at how we get this M mode. To perform an M mode measurement of the left ventricle, you need a parasternal long or short axis view. You can actually do it from both. I will show you how to do it from the short axis. So the first thing you have to look into is if the ventricle is really round. This is important for the reasons already mentioned. So once you have a nice view of the left ventricle, you will put the M mode exactly through the middle of the left ventricle and optimize the image so that you have a very good contour, and then freeze the image and perform the measurement of the septum at diastole. So we have the biggest width of the left ventricle shortly before the QRS complex starts. So this is where you would start with your M mode measurement of the septum. Then you would measure the end diastolic diameter, the posterior wall. Now all these measurements are diastole, and you would then perform the same measurements at systole for the end systolic diameter, for the posterior lateral wall, and these are the measurements basically that you would perform. What is the M mode good for? It's good to quantify the thickness of the septum, for the left ventricular size, for left ventricular function, for pericardial effusion. You would see an echo-free space here, usually behind the left ventricle, and also to determine whether the contraction of the septum and the posterior wall is synchronous. So in situations where you have desynchronous contraction, for example in left bundle branch block, you would see abnormalities also in M mode. Those are the normal values, which you can also look up in your fact sheet, but just for the sake of simplicity, fractional shortening of above 25 to 28, I would say, is normal. And the normal size of the end diastolic diameter is somewhere in the range of, I would say, 40 to maximum 49 millimeters. And the septal thickness should be between 10 and 11 at its upper limit. The M mode of the mitral valve has lost much of its importance. Previously, this technique was used to even quantify the degree of mitral stenosis, but nowadays, in the age of 2D echo, this is not very important. But just to show you how an M mode of the mitral valve looks, you would now cut right through the mitral valve at the tip of the leaflets, and the image you get is a motion of the anterior leaflet, which has an M form. You see, this is the early diastolic opening and the atrial contraction or late diastolic opening, and the posterior leaflet will move exactly in opposite, with a motion downwards towards the left ventricle in the early diastole and also at the late diastole. Theoretically, what is this M mode good for? It's good to look at mitral stenosis, and you could even see mitral valve prolapse and assess the so-called systolic anterior motion of the mitral valve. So in reality, what you see with the M mode of the mitral valve is all those things that you also see in 2D imaging. So from my point of view, I don't think it really has much additional value, but at least you should recognize these things if you have the M mode. So this basically concludes the applications of M mode in a routine exam. So to summarize, all you would really need is an M mode of the aorta and the left atrium, and an M mode of the left ventricle, and this should be part of a routine exam. On top of this, a routine exam does not need more M mode manipulations.